We're just looking for questions, or you can stretch, get comfortable. Forgotten what this guy is. Who was eating with Daisy. Brenda's probably not here today. She was doing all kinds of talks. Brenda Sadler, Brenda Zedek, the butterfly lady. She was, this weekend we were at the Wildflower Association meeting together. She is just a delightful person. And man, she has been some places in search of butterflies and butterfly knowledge. Terrible to look at the headlines and see butterfly populations are down 25 and 50% everywhere. I think we really did when we were younger. We did actually see butterflies floating all around the garden, and now you might see one or two at a time, but not whole bunches of them like once upon a time.
No,
Very, no, just not the same. Hey, Steve, sorry, sounded like you.
I think it's I agree. We've seen less butterflies than we did as kids. Depending on where you were as a kid in the inner city where I lived, it was tough. But once I went up north, or we went even to the zoo, it was different. Or
Yeah,
out in Franklin Valley,
yeah. I
there
think as
weren't
we,
as many. Because I wasn't a gardener then, I can't say there were as many quote unquote gardens, but
right.
there are always flowering plants.
I'm thinking that they're less than even than when our kids were little, so 40 years ago. I seem to remember seeing more, looking out in the morning and seeing more butterflies floating around above the garden, and certainly a lot of caterpillars. Well, we'll see whether we can beef the numbers up here a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh,
Uh, Dave has in chat. I remember that March is the time to prune roses. Still a good idea, and how?
um, I prune roses anytime in the spring. I try to get them before growth starts, but yes, any rose group that I've ever been in, you can kind of divide them right down the middle. And there are those that say that you can't prune them or things start budding out, and others that say you've got to prune them before things start budding out. Talking to the rose growers as opposed to the rose society members. Talking to rose growers who like, oh darn, I've forgotten Nancy's last name. Um, who are growing acres of roses because they sell roses. They start cutting when they have a chance to start cutting, when it's safe to walk on the soil, and they keep cutting until they're done. In fact, when we took a group of people to the botanical garden in Niagara Falls, and we arranged to talk to the gardeners there, the gardener in charge of the rose garden was still pruning roses, and it was June. I mentioned it. I said that these looks like you're still pruning over here, and we're talking hundreds of roses. It's a huge rose collection. She said, "Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I don't get to all of them early." I said, "Couldn't you just collaborate with some of the other gardeners in other sections of the botanical garden, and you can get some help to get your heavy schedule pruning done first?" And she looked at me and she said, "Have somebody else prune my roses? No way." So you can prune them whenever you want to prune them. I try to prune them before they start growing, and I prune them hard. I prune them down to good wood that's solid white inside, not brown in the center, not hollow. And when I prune them down, I'm pruning them down to a bud that goes outward. So if I've got a bunch of canes like this, I want a bud that goes out this way from this one and out this way, not back toward each other. And then just let them grow. The hybrid tea roses anyway. The shrub roses, I just take out old wood and cut the stems that are left back to good wood. So I take out the oldest wood. What was that one that we had? Might have been a Louis Cans climber, and the catalog from Own Root Roses explained to us that it's probably only necessary to take out the 20-year wood. And it's true that wood didn't get brown and old on that climber. And on climbers that have one blooming period, which is most of them, I cut all the side branches back to just a couple of buds and shorten the main stems. So And you can start doing that anytime. Just don't. One of the things we're going to be telling people today is drinking burners. Don't walk on soil when it's wet and frozen further down. Or if you do, find some way to cushion the soil so that you're not making a mess of it. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Nothing so far.
Okay. For some reason today, Steve, every picture that I grabbed from your collection for the questions slides, they were all insect pictures or a whole lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah, well, sometimes that's the mood I'm in. You go
Oh,
walking out and you take a whole bunch of those pictures, and I don't know, or I don't know. I did notice that when I flipped through what you have set up for tonight.
I had one that I
Yep.
have to ask you about because I don't even know what the heck it was. A set of chisels, a set of wood chisels. And I thought, where did that come from? What's it about? This one was in last week, but I left it in because I really like this picture.
Oh, so do I. That's at Felsha. Oh, someday.
That's a lake in northern Ontario where Steve has been
Mhm.
to fish.
The best walleye lake I've ever been on. But anyway,
And I don't know where that is.
that's in Colorado. We
Oh,
walked up to a waterfall. That's Biz right there, and Axel's on your left. Colorado, or yeah,
I remember. We went past the fire station, and the firefighters
yes,
were, oh, you guys, you should see what firefighters have to do that work in the mountains and get called on to handle forest fires. These guys were putting weights on and running up the mountain. We were already having some trouble breathing. We could tell we were high up, and here's these guys getting themselves all weighted up to go running for I think the one guy said it was a 2 mile run. Um, man, that is
yep. Yeah,
very.
they had a bunch of chainsaws. They were doing maintenance on. And I said, "Oh, all different sizes for trees." And they said, "No, for getting into houses or roofs,
Right, for cutting through
you
the
know,
roof to get
to
in.
cut through to get in."
Well,
So,
to cut through to get to where it's smoldering inside or whatever. Yeah,
yes, but
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, I remember that time. There is nothing blue like a gentian. Just,
No. And you can't capture it even.
yeah,
It's different in sunlight, at real light, that's for sure.
that's a nice one too. That
Great.
Japanese wax bell. I wish we could
Yep.
get here, but I don't want to have to grow something that's going to get frosted. I think we're in kind of frostbite.
Yeah.
Looks like it's about time to start.
Yep.
Yeah. So let me get through here. For those who have just joined us and maybe haven't been here before, we're looking for as much participation as you want to give us. We have things to say, but um, if you are able to open the chat window, you'll find that you can, at any time you want, type in a question. Steve will watch those. Type to everyone. Type to the meeting group chat. Don't toggle that switch to go to Janet and Steve. You can toggle the switch to go to a friend of yours if you want to talk behind our backs or anything like that. But don't send a message to just Janet or to Solo Steve because we are watching the group chat and not going back and forth between them. And we've got
And
places,
we forget to switch the toggles.
yeah, and we've got places where we're set up to answer those chat questions, but also Steve's watching for the ones that need to be answered right now, so you can chat anytime. But if you want to talk, please talk. Just look in your reactions menu for the raise hand control, or there's, depending on your device and the operating system you're on, it might be in participants, but find that raise your hand. And when you press that button, your name jumps to the top of our alphabetical list and we'll know to say, go ahead, turn on your microphone.
Yep. Well, good evening and welcome to Free4All Friday. This is our 33rd edition. All gardeners are welcome.
Come celebrate growing, cultivate problem solving with us. We're gardenataz.org. I'm Janet McConvich.
I'm
Oh,
Stephen Nicola.
I lost him. And we gardened professionally for 40 years and wrote and taught about gardens in the off season. Now that we're retired from working in other people's gardens for pay anyway, we work in other people's gardens for fun. But now we are spending more time doing these kinds of things. We're really glad you joined us for Free-for-All Friday because we think the more gardeners who talk to each other, the more of the unique experiences that each of us have had working in a particular soil with particular groups of plants that are not reproduced, replicated anyplace else. You hand off information to each other, and we all end up going, getting further along in our garden. And don't we all want to do that? If you go to gardenaz.org, please remember that it's .org. We're hoping .com is still not floating around out there, but we haven't worked on that one in years. So you want to find out what's going on, then you go to gardenaz.org. And that's where we've been putting the things that we've been writing for years, trying to put them all in there. I found out something terrible today, Steve. I was looking for
Uh-oh.
a 1997 article because it was something that I could share with people, and I've arranged to do that. But I found a whole folder full of things that we're going to have to convert because they're too old. This computer can't read them.
Oh,
It really
geez.
adds more time to putting things up, but we're trying to get things put onto the website so that you can read them, we can read them, and we don't have to write the same thing twice because we really like to learn new things as many times as we can learn new things. Invite your friends. This is free for all. We have quite a large group that we can accommodate. If we happen to go over that number, we'll just change our Zoom account. But if you go to the Fridays page or tell anybody, they don't have to be on our email list if they don't want. They can just go to the Fridays page and click the link and join us. Most Fridays
Yep.
between 7 and 8. So are there any questions in the group here? Nice to see you.
Nothing in chat other than a compliment on my photographs from Karen, which, having seen some of hers, I appreciate.
Hey, that's pretty nice. Thank you. And you're watching for Barry, Steve, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and just start in. If there's not questions from people, I'll tell you what we've been thinking. This is the time of year when, as my neighbor said, I am done with winter, done with it. And I agree that if you're going to get away to someplace warm, it's going to be the end of February and the beginning of March. But if you can't get away geographically, it's time to visit a conservatory because it's like walking in the warm sun on a beach somewhere, and you get that smell of things growing. My granddaughter came out to the car. I went to pick her up, and she came out to the car the other morning, and she said, "Hey, it smells like spring." Of course, it got cold the next day, but I couldn't smell it yet. But the kids are more sensitive noses, and there is definitely a smell to that. We're wondering where your favorite conservatories are. This is Frederick Meyer, isn't it, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, Frederick Meyer
Meyer Garden.
Garden in Grand Rapids. This is their conservatory, and you can certainly go there. Beautiful place to walk, and a lot of space to sit and just enjoy the plants. We also go to Mathai Botanical Gardens in Ann Arbor. We go to Belle Isle, the Anna Scripps Whipcomb Conservatory down on Belle Isle. And right now, if you went to the production greenhouses, obviously that would be to the east and north of, well, anyway, there you can find them outside the conservatory. They are right now the floriculture department for the city of Detroit are planting the plugs for all the annuals they're going to plant. I think they got a shipment of something like 75,000 already, and they got another 50,000 coming next week. And you can poke your head in and just smell that wonderful odor of things growing. But where do you go? Tell people where you go. Goldner Walsh Nursery has an older greenhouse set up, and it's kind of nice to walk in there. So you might be near a production nursery greenhouse that you could go walk in. But do that.
Any place that has a nice green, just that green pause, the growing green, not the neutral green that we have outside right now. These are actively growing green plants where
Yeah,
ours are just waiting to start.
yeah,
We've
yeah.
seen a little bit of snowdrops coming up now. So,
Yeah, we're behind. How about you, everybody? We are where our Iris reticulata are, which are normally blooming the last week of February, where they're situated in our garden. There was a 3 foot deep snowbank sitting on top of them until just recently, so they haven't shown up yet. Our snowdrops have barely broken the surface. The hellebores aren't open, so it's being a late
yep.
season, late start to the season. Florida Botanical Gardens, woo, that's
Yeah.
cool, Shell.
And different,
Yeah.
just like
Thanks, Donna.
conservatory.
It is east of the conservatory. I'm so turned around when I get into downtown Detroit, thinking about I felt like I just came south here, but I'm looking north across the river. Um, okay, so if you want to share where you go walking, it's the time of year to do it. And I think I saw a question about pruning.
Yeah, Judy has, how much longer do I have to prune a conifer to control its size? All of its life.
I think Judy means how long this season. You can prune a
Well,
conifer at any time to control its size. The best times are before bud break or late August, early September, if you want to control the size of something that wants to be bigger than you want. So depending on what it is you're growing, let's see who's going to break bud first. Steve, who breaks bud first, pines or spruces? I think
I
I
think the
pines.
boy,
We're going to say spruces.
almost the same time,
Yeah.
it
Um,
seems like.
But I'm not usually worried that I'm running out of time on pruning woody plants until the 1st of April here in Michigan. As I go down to Dayton, let's see, when were we down there with that big Nursery Landscape Association workshop that we did? Was that the 30th of March?
Yes, it was in Mar it was late March or very early April.
I think it was late March, and we were
And
already
bud,
we were already pushing it there. The buds were
yep.
working on things already. So depending on where you are, you just need to be cognizant of bud break. And if you cut before bud break, you do a lot more in terms of controlling size than after bud break, because after bud break, uh, all bets are off in terms of the control and which branch is going to take off and grow. I think we have to look this one up, Steve. That almost has to be a squash bee, because that's a squash flower, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure it's squash flower, but
Yeah. And I don't think we have ever identified a squash bee individually. Someone might know. Michelle might know.
yeah.
Okay. So onward. Oh, potentilla and plumbago. So much color in plumbago flower. Bracts have color. Even the petals, when they dry, become a darker blue color.
Yeah, it's
Quite the cool
nice.
plant. Okay. Roses are red, violets are blue, seedlings are sweet, but so late are you. People are asking about, is it time to start seeds? Look and think about what you see outside in the spring. It's cold, it's early, it's still wet, but there's seeds. These are maple seeds germinating. Um, and what they do is they stay little. They're out in good light, but it's cold, and the cold keeps them short and stocky. That lupin with just 2 leaves is going to sit there at that size. And you might think it's not growing, but it is. That leaf, those leaves are full-sized leaves that haven't yet pumped out all their cells with water. The leaf is going to get bigger. But right now, it's got all the chlorophyll that a bigger leaf would have, and it's sitting in the sun, churning out energy and putting it all into roots. So you get these stocky, great plants growing outside, as opposed to inside where people start things, they get all stretched out and leggy because it's too warm, so they bolt up, and there's not the kind of light that they need. And maybe there's a cat that lives in the house that comes and chews on it. It's just a shame to see them get all leggy and lank like this. It's too early to start inside unless you've got a cold room and good lights, especially grow lights, so that as soon as they sprout, I mean, as soon as they come up, you spritz them with water and then move them into a cold room. We're talking about 55 to 60 degrees. There are a lot of seeds that say they need 70 degrees to germinate, and that's true, but that's just to germinate and then get them out, get them into a place where they can grow cold and bright. They're much, much nicer that way, much healthier, which also applies to the weeds that have started out there. It's a good time of year. When you can first walk in the garden is to walk around and look and see where are my weed problems going to be. These weeds, let's see, what all is here? There's purple nightshade. There's or you
That
this looks
is that
like a
little
tall
euphorbia in there that
tall rocket's in here. Lady's thumb is in here. This one I've never known the name of. It's some kind of a Lysimachia. But all of these, if you see patches of this kind of stuff coming up, they're still small enough that you can put a piece of newspaper and a rock on top of them and kill them. But they are doing the same thing that I was explaining that lupin is doing, is they are just packing away the energy for a big jump later. People always say, oh my gosh, I went away for the weekend and the weeds jumped up. Yes, they did. They took all that energy that they'd been working on and they put it into fast growth, very fast growth. And some of those things, this is a bull thistle. That's the biennial type of thistle. I don't worry about it nearly as much as Canada thistle, but they get hard to pull out when they're packing a lot of energy into that taproot that's going to grow from their leafy year to the next year when they bloom.
that we have an Irina, Irina. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right.
Yeah.
She lives. I know she's new to this to us. She lives in Farmington Hills, and she was asking, "Is it too early to prune variegated red twig dogwood?" So
It
she
is.
hasn't heard a lot of the pruning stuff that
It
we've
is
meant.
not. It is not too early to prune them. We used to prune our red twig dogwoods all the way down to the ground every year because we like them to be totally red. If you want them to bloom, then you need to leave some of last year's wood because they're going to bloom on the second year wood. But most people aren't really looking for the flowers and the berries. They are looking for the red twigs. And we would go out to any place we could find. Colgate Farm out on Meadowbrook Road at 12 Mile, one of Michigan State University's establishments, has a lot of red twig dogwoods. And one year we went out in January with our zoo volunteers and cut a whole truck full of red twig dogwoods so that we could weave our wattle fences with them. So it's not too early. Just don't cut on a wet day. It's just heartbreaking to see what happens to dogwoods when they're cut when it's wet, because all it takes is one stem that's developed some of the canker. There'll be black streaks on the stem, and as it gets going further, the whole base of the stem will be black brown. But you cut one of those with your pruners on a wet day, and you infect every other branch you cut. I've seen hedges where people took and cut the red twig dogwoods, and every single top bit of the plant is black and dyed back, which is just an awful thing. So just don't do it on a wet day. Looks like we got a hand up, Steve.
We have a hand up for Valerie.
Go ahead,
Go
Valerie.
ahead, Valerie.
You'll have to turn your microphone on. We can
Yep.
click things off, but you have to reach your microphone control.
There we go.
There you are.
I get garlic mustard every spring and I don't know how to get rid of it. I read things that are so funny. You can use a torch. You can do Roundup, which I don't want to do. So what is your suggestion?
We pull garlic mustard where it's getting into gardens and smother seedling areas and try to figure out where it's coming from. For instance, at the Detroit Zoo, we didn't have any garlic mustard. We had lots of other kinds of weeds, but not that one. And then one year there was garlic mustard, and we realized that the golf course next to the zoo, which is upwind, so the wind as it came through went across the golf course first, then to us, was bringing us the garlic mustard. So we were especially attentive to it on the side toward the golf course. And we asked at the golf course, can you weed whip down those plants so that they don't bloom and make seed and send it our way? but it's not an easy task. And I think it's why people end up doing things like taking a blowtorch and just blasting all the seeds. It's one of those things that fits with this saying an English gardener told me one day when we were in England. I said, what if you've got that weed in your perennials? I was talking about quackgrass that he was weeding out of the vegetable garden. And he leaned on his poking stick. He was burning the quackgrass. He leaned on his poking stick and scratched his head and he looked at me. He said, you just got to try. And that's what it is with garlic mustard. You just have to stay on top of it. So I've let's see, at a client's house, at Virginia Smith's house, Steve, we had garlic mustard show up in the kind of the little wooded corner of the yard.
Yeah.
Right. And I pulled all the adult plants, used newspaper and mulch to smother the others. And then we just watched for it. We never figured out where that had come from. And you can never tell. Good luck, Valerie.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anne is commenting, this past fall, I spread a healthy portion of leaves into a 2-year-old garden around all the plants. They were not shredded. I imagine now this spring they are all matted. Can I leave them as is? Will rain or hose water get through to the roots? Should I pull them out as far as the drip line to add compost and or some mulch, but leave the rest of the leaves where they lay?
Yep. You don't have to do anything. Maybe they matted. If certain types of leaves mat, Norway maple leaves have a tendency to mat together, and sycamore leaves, sometimes oak leaves, especially if they're in a wet area. But if they're not in a solid mat, to where, Steve, this year we've got to get some pictures to really explain to people. We call it pushing up hats. Watch the plants as they begin to grow next month. If you see that a whole roof of leaves is being lifted up by the plants, break that apart and set it to the side. But everything else you can leave just like it is. If you want it to look better, you can do what we call a veneer mulch on top, or you add some mulch on top of the leaves, but you do not have to take them off. The seedlings that of woodland plants come through just fine. Older plants come through. People tend to go out and spend a lot of time raking leaves out, and then they turn around the next day and say, look at all those plants that we're trying to get up. Well, yeah, now they've jumped out of the soil and they're going to get frosted at the first hard frost, and weeds are going to start in among them. So if you can put up with the look, then just let them be. If you can't put up with the look, then next year shred your leaves before you put them on, because the shredded leaves break down that much faster. There's more surface area for microorganisms to work on. Someone just told me the other day about their sugar maple and oak leaves. They said, no, they were like 8 inches deep. I said, well, they're always that deep around big trees because it's a lot of leaves. But go look at in the woods in August. Steve and I walk in a recreation area near us. We have for 50 years. And it's a mature woods. And it's loaded with leaves in the fall. We like to go there and scuffle through the leaves. But there's nothing on the ground in August. And there's nobody there raking or doing anything. It's just that some leaves break down with worms working in the cool season. Some leaves break down with fungus working in the warmer season, but they all do break down. That's a long answer for a short question, I think.
Yeah.
I think I saw Irina adding.
Switch the picture.
Where's the what? Oh, switch the picture. Thank you. Oh, well, that leads me
Uh-oh.
and that's
That leads to another point.
well, that's Pierre Benerup, and we can leave this up for a little bit. We think we have locked our season 6 lineup in, so now I can finish writing the subscription page and let everybody know what's up. We have we're starting in April 12th. We're starting with lesser known native plants with Pierre Benerup, who you just saw in his wonderful suit. Doesn't dress that way very often. We'll go with easy on the environment that Steve and I will present. Then what makes a 5-star garden plant with Richard Hockey from the Chicago Botanic Garden. Barry Burton is taking the July webinar with crowd pleasers in the high summer garden. And Barry, I think, is going to be here tonight too. He is a treat. He is a real treat. We'll do lawn substitutes with Pierre Benerup in August. Forgotten Fall Faces, the best late color and interest with George Papadallis of Telly's Nursery in September. October, container plantings for fall and winter. Jennifer Brennan is North Shore Chicago's version of George Papadopoulos. Um, update on the compromised and grown girdled roots. Steve and I will be presenting that. We're interviewing a number of experts on what's the situation now. We have Kids in Nature for December, the Traveling Gardener with China, probably China, Argentina, Chile, maybe Siberia with Dave Mitchner. We'll do pruning and shaping plants in February and wind up with planting a tree, why, where, and how with Marvin Petaway. I always want to put an extra syllable into your name, Marvin. Sorry. It's a great lineup. It really is, and they're all plant people. You saw him in a suit a minute ago. This is Pierre Pennerup.
That's
Never wears a suit. He's always out, and he is 90. Right. He was talking to us to our webinar group on his 90th birthday last year.
Yep.
He is 90. He has grown millions, literally millions of perennials in one of the biggest nurseries, Sunny Border nurseries in the country. He's retired now, but he can't get away from plants. He just still loves doing it. Okay, but I think I saw something from Irina that said that one of her red twig dogwoods is bigger than the other one.
yeah.
Yeah, pruning won't really help the smaller one catch up. You need to have better, you might have to change the growing conditions, or you might just have to wait for some time, but the pruning won't speed them up. Sonia has just come in from, Curacao. Sonia has been in the Caribbean, the island next to Aruba, and did not know until she got there that it was Carnival.
Yes, we got actually 3 different carnival parades while we were there. It was it was great fun, and I'm here to collect my pups and spend the weekend with my folks.
Yeah.
But hello, everyone.
Hello. Nice to see you.
What else you got, Steve?
Hi, Ann.
Michelle wants to point out, remember that you can wait a little bit before going into your soil because many bumblebees live underground until later in the spring.
True, before you start digging and turning things over. But we don't do much digging and turning things over if we can help it. Not just wholesale, not like one of our clients used to. She just thought that it just felt good to go out there and turn the garden. She says, I like turning the soil. We'll wait on
Like
that.
vegetable gardeners with their rototiller back in the day.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I would say if anyone is still where we are in Guelph, Ontario, winter-wise, we had what we thought were warm temperatures while we were away for 5 days. There is still not an inch of grass even visible in our yard. We are still under probably at least a foot of snow. So I think any questions around digging and pruning and everything else is going to get delayed for us this year.
There's still a lot of ice in the ground here in Michigan where we are. I think I saw people pointing out that garlic mustard is a biennial, and it is a biennial.
One asked, and Michelle said that she thought it was, but she would confirm it.
Yeah, it definitely is. And like Honesty and Dame's Rocket and the whole mustard family, there's a lot of biennials in it, but you have the chance that first year it's just going to make leaf and a taproot. The second year is when it blooms. So you for sure have to get the blooming ones out, keep the blooming ones out, keep the blooming ones out. But I find the little ones easier to smother and kill each year.
Susan is trying to grow turmeric this year. What is the best way to consume it?
Turmeric. Boy, I've always eaten it as a powder. I don't know. I'll have to turn around here and grab the herb book if there's a break.
I've seen recipes that use it a little bit like ginger because it's the root, right? That you're using. So I think I've seen some that in the same way that you'd use ginger, or maybe in a like curry spices, so sort of saute it with other spices. But yeah, I mostly use it as powder.
Yeah, I will take a look when we get a break. If the break comes today, great. Because we do have a friend coming in, he'll probably entertain everybody while I can turn around and look. If not, then I'll get it on to next Friday.
And I see I was gonna say I see a couple chats coming in just about I think from David and was it from Anne? Hi, Anne, and Curacao, sort of welcomes. Who's that? Is that Diane? Diane. Yeah, yep. No, I had a great time, and it is good to hear from everyone. And sorry that I missed last week's Saturday webinar. I'll make it up to you.
Last week was fun. Garden Lakes was a
Yeah.
fun time.
All right, I'm gonna go set my bags in and let the dogs attack me a little bit more.
Yeah, they will do that.
Welcome, Sonia. Welcome.
I I got a direct message from John, and he said this is his first Free-for-All Friday meeting. This is great. He liked our idea of using carpet liner as a discreet way to prevent weeds from creeping into beds from neighboring yards. Does it also work to keep critters from burrowing under fences?
I have seen critters. What was the one at Michigan State, Steve, with the muskrats, for instance, chew right through heavy duty plastic. So I'm not sure that it would keep animals out. The best digging deterrent that we have is to put wire fence horizontally, but first bend it so that the bottom, maybe 4 or 5 inches is at an angle. So when you put the wire fence up, you have a floor going outward from it. So that when the animal tries to dig next to the fence, he's digging into wire. And that is the best deterrent that I know, but not the plastic. No, sorry about that.
Diane recommends checking Indian recipes for how turmeric is used as ingredient.
And that's a master chef giving us that there. Thank you, Diane. Yeah. Yeah, the problem with so many herbs is that we grow them, but we have not seen them in the live form. Most of us, we've seen them as powders and pellets and dried leaves. And a lot of people that I know that grow their own herbs are hesitant to use them. They aren't sure if they're using the right part of the herb. I do have a number of herb books that I use. One, boy, it's the old Harrowsmith publishers. Maybe it might be Herbs for Northern Gardeners, but it's a very practical book that says you're growing this herb, here's how you dry it, here's how long it takes to dry, here's what you use. I picked that book up because I was growing chamomile when Sonia was a baby. She had a lot of stomach issues, and chamomile can soothe the stomach. So I was growing chamomile, and I couldn't figure out why it was so stinky, and it didn't seem to work. Well, I was using the leaves. It's the flowers of the chamomile that concentrate that particular chemical that it soothes the stomach. So better to read first and find out how to use
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. John's asking, what's the best strategy to deal with a groundhog invasion?
Traps.
Live traps, or, well,
Oh, I think we've only ever used a live trap.
yeah,
And
live traps.
depending on how cagey your groundhog is, one groundhog used to be pretty successful with an apple or a cantaloupe. Cut the cantaloupe and put a chunk of cantaloupe in there because the smell was good and drew them in. We had a couple of groundhogs that we put all different kinds of things in there day after day. You put the trap out and you open it at dawn and you close it at dusk because you don't want the skunks that come out at night to get in there. You want the groundhog that works during the day. Yeah, but that groundhog that we couldn't catch on anything else, I turned to Brenda, different Brenda, and I said, "That's it. I give up." And I put my hand in my pocket and I had a mint, an Andes mint from the restaurants. Put them with your bill on the table. I said, I put a mint in there, and that got him. So you might have to try a couple of different things to get him. And then do remember that even squirrels can come back from 5 miles away. Anne's dad was having a squirrel war one year, and he decided that he wasn't taking the squirrels far enough, that he suspected they were coming back. So he started, every time he trapped a squirrel, spray painting a little color on its butt. And he found that if he didn't take them more than 5 miles, they were back within 2 weeks. So you want to let them out a long ways away if you're going to use a live trap.
Yeah, and you don't take them out of the live trap till you're letting them out wherever you take them. You could transport them in that cage, but they could make a mess if you, like in the back of a pickup's fine, but I'm not sure I would put that trap in a car.
I put a tarp underneath, like when we moved that raccoon, I
Yeah.
put a tarp underneath. Michelle is saying that she said she saw groundhogs climb. Oh yeah, groundhogs can climb
I've
apple
got,
trees. I see them sitting in top of weeping mulberries. It's kind of like a weeping mulberry is made for a groundhog. As the mulberry is leafing out, they're eating all those nice, tasty, fresh new leaves, just sitting up there looking in your window.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. Hey, other people have commented on what, uh, have you ever tried to trap a rabbit? It's same thing. They demolish, but
I don't, we've never trapped rabbits, I don't think.
nope.
We just fence them out. Rabbits can climb, but generally don't because they're prey animals and they know that if they get themselves into a confined spot, they're more likely to get preyed upon or they have some kind of thing like that. The best deterrent we saw, because Ruth is saying a dog in the yard, yep, a dog
Yep.
frequents the yard. We saw one of the best deterrents was this cat in a yard in Northville. It was when George was living in Northville, Steve, I think, that every other yard in the neighborhood was just beset with rabbits. Their vegetable gardens were getting ripped up. The rabbits were so hungry that George called me one night and he said, "You told me that they don't climb." He says, "I'm watching them climb the fence and get into my beans. And if they eat my beans, I'm going to eat them."
Mhm.
But this yard had no rabbit damage in it at all because this cat, old, ancient, sedentary cat, would come out and lay on the rocks that the sun hit in the afternoon and sleep in the afternoon. One cat just happened to sit there, and that paralleled Lila up in Houghton Hancock area. I can't remember the name of the little town outside of Houghton where she was, but she had that old golden retriever, and it was
Oh yeah.
right that none of the deer came anywhere near the greenhouse because the golden retriever liked to sit in the warm greenhouse and sleep. So yeah, sometimes it works.
Diane loves the color of these glads and wondering what other plant that blooms that color. I think some cannas do. There's some rhododendrons and azaleas that have that color.
And some
Uh,
trigridias and dahlias.
Dahlias, yeah, Dahlia Hill. I had another one in mind and it floated away.
Sorry, I shouldn't have cut in.
But anyway, there are a few, mostly in the spring, not much in the later in the fall that I could think of that.
We have an addition to some pruning issue that came up last time about pruning with power tools. Power to the pruner. We were talking about what makes a thaw, and I meant to look at the weather to see what's up, whether we're coming up on a thaw now, but it's a thaw if you got 3 or more days where daytime's going to be above freezing, and the 2 nights in that group stay above 31. It can go down to freezing, but not below freezing. And what you want is to be able to prune and leave the plant 24 to 36 hours of non-freezing weather to adjust its cell water content so that the water in the cells doesn't freeze and explode the cells. And you want to prune on a dry day. It's never a good idea to prune wood on a wet day. Well, while we were talking about pruning, the issue of power tools came up, and can we use a sawzall? And our friend Sue Gruba, who is a master pruner, longtime pruner and educator, lecturer on pruning and other topics, she wrote that she absolutely loves her reciprocating saw. She has two 18-volt batteries for it. Each one will last a whole day, but she always keeps one charged up. She told me that she keeps it inside in the winter time because the batteries, at a cold temperature, the batteries lose their charge. And she says that she can really get going and beat up the saw. So she makes sure she cleans the contacts on the saw and the batteries well. And it's 10 years old, never failed her. She wears eye protection when she uses it. And the blades that she uses, she gets the package of blade for Sawzall. Someone else pointed out that we treat Sawzall like we do Kleenex. It might be a Puff or a Downy or a Kraft tissue, but I'll call them all Kleenex. Well, we call all of the reciprocating saws Sawzall now. But she uses this blade that is, if you see there, it's marked 5 TPI, 5 teeth per inch. And that's the blade that she uses the most. It makes a great smooth cut. The more teeth per inch, the finer the cut that you get, the more that you are more likely to not have torn and ragged edges on a cut. She does have one with 3 teeth per inch, 3 TPI. It's rough. It's not even easy to get it to start cutting. It's the blade she does not use. She takes both blades, both this rough one, which is used for demolition work more than anything else, and the finer tooth saws. When they get older, she keeps them, and she uses them to divide miscanthus roots. She says as she works that it occurs to her that, boy, she used to work so hard with a shovel and clippers and whatever, and here she can use a Sawzall to do it. So those are the blades that you want to look for if you've got a Sawzall. And I was pleased to see that the Corona that we use, a hand saw, or have been using a hand saw. I've got an electric chainsaw too. It's a 6 teeth per inch. I've also had 7 teeth per inch saws. They make a very fine cut. They're great for those close cuts on small branches where you want to make sure that you don't tear any edges. So anybody got any other pruning power tools that they use that they want to recommend? Send us an email, send us a picture. People need recommendations, and power is for the people who have learned how to do it and need a little extra help with the power end of the spectrum. Yeah. Pruning stuff, Steve? No?
No, we could get to something in a minute. Dave, it says Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and it looked like Tuesday on my weather all fit that guideline.
Good. Because the end of March is like my sprint time. We sprint into spring. It's like, if I'm going to cut things down to the ground, I'd really like to cut them down before they start growing. And it's that last week of March that the ground is good to walk on, and we get some thaw, so that's good. People ask what we prune this time of year. Today I pruned some of this rug juniper to tell you how that works. I'm not too worried because it's a dry day. I'm not worried about cutting the wood, and I'm not too worried about the rug juniper being protected because it's laying on the ground and we can just put a piece of cardboard on it. But I wanted to show you what I do. It's been bothering me all winter because when you try to shovel snow on a driveway, any little bit of vegetation will grab your shovel and ruin the throw of the snow. I would have cut this in the fall. That would be my usual time to cut it, but we were doing other things, lots of other things, Steve, and I missed it. So you don't want to take and just chop straight along the edge of something that's growing wider than you want it to grow, because I've lifted up a piece of the greenery, a branch that has green leaves on it, to show you what's underneath. There's a tangle of old wood that's been building up there, and if you cut through that, you're going to leave a bunch of just woody stems. And juniper, it's one of those PJ Fax plants: pine, juniper, fir, arborvitae, cypress, and spruce, that don't grow from wood that doesn't have green leaves on it. So if you cut through that, you're going to leave a whole mess there of brown branches that will not sprout. And next time there'll be more, and you build up just a whole bunch of brown there, so that every time you cut, you're a browner and browner wall of wood. So cutting that is a matter of cutting whole branches out, picking up the piece that's laying on the driveway, picking it up and following it back and cutting it back a ways so that there's room for it to grow for a few years before it reaches the edge again. And I took all of that, about 18 inches of cutting, 18 inches along the edge of the driveway, all of that came out. And most of it is wood. I lifted up this one and followed it back to a side branch that had green leaves on it and cut it there. This one I picked up after I cut it the first time it was running parallel to the edge of the driveway. And I picked it up and went, no, 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 I don't want wood all along the edge. And I took it all the way back to where it branched to a green plant. I could have cut it right here. See this with green leaves on it, could have been the new end, but it was growing right at along the edge of the driveway. So I cut it back. And then, so now there's lots of room for things to grow. These tips that are going to grow out at least 3 or 4 inches have 3 or 4 inches to grow. And the tips back here that are now in the sun are going to grow and fill that area. You have to leave a plant room to grow at least for a year, or you're going to be back pruning it that same year. So this is the same area that I picked up when I got started. And now there's none of that old wood in there. Now it's all green. I'll finish that one. It's a better pruning day because that area right there, I'm going to want to throw something on top of just in case it gets really cold tonight. Any questions coming in?
Yeah, John, he's a newbie and he's afraid he's monopolizing questions. And
Oh, no, don't worry about that. There are so many people here.
He's sending them direct, so not everybody's seeing them, but that's that. Anyway, he says, I'm sure you've been asked this a million times. I hate to monopolize the conversation. Any chemical-free solution to get rid of bindweed, bishopsweed, and false bellflower? And I was starting to type about smothering.
Those are 3 bad ones.
Yep.
When you talk about non-toxic ways of killing plants, the only ways that I would consider non-toxic, as in not having a lasting effect on the soil and the other plants around, are burn down chemicals like vinegar, ammonia, some of the potassium fatty acids in some of the safer products that are sold as a natural organic way to get rid of plants. But all they do is they burn the foliage that's exposed. And that's kind of like just cutting the top off. And if you cut it off enough times, you can starve a plant out, but you have to cut it off every time it sprouts green. Bindweed, for instance, that's our main fallback, is we dig out all we can of the bindweed, and we mark the places where we know that it's snapped off and is going down deeper or further out, maybe underneath the lawn. We mark those places and come back every single week for every little bit of bindweed that's showing up, and we keep plucking it out. And usually in a year or two, and I hate to discourage you, but it does take that long. But you can get it down to just a few areas to say it's coming from here and it's coming from here. And if I just remember to walk past there every week, you can keep that under control. Bishopsweed is even a year or two later, little bits of root that you missed can come back. I find it best to dig that in the last half of the summer rather than the spring, because the roots are less brittle then and you're more likely to get all the running roots out. So I smother it if it's early in the year with newspaper and mulch on top of it, and then come back in afterwards and dig it over. But I don't know any other ways to get rid of them. I think Diane's asking about the old hellebore foliage.
Yeah. Can she throw it in the compost? She did in the past, but I remember you mentioned that they get sort of botrytis and maybe composting is not a good idea.
If you have a hot compost, botrytis will get killed in a hot compost. At 140 degrees, you're going to kill the resting bodies, kind of akin to spores and fungus. But if it's a cold compost, you are keeping the inoculant around. But it's not a real dangerous thing to keep around, not like, Vericillium wilt or something. Well, that's a virus and that's not killed in compost, but it's not a real dangerous thing to have around because it's going to affect damaged and weak leaves, breaks in the stems and whatever on hellebores. It has to tend to be close by. So you're probably okay to put it in the compost. We certainly put all the peony botrytis into the compost. Botrytis itself, there's a whole lot of different botrytises. It's the peony botrytis that affects peony, and I'm not sure which botrytis it is that affects hellebore. But the botrytis group of bacteria are not are not aggressive pathogens. They're opportunists that get into weak places. So you're probably okay putting them in the compost.
Right.
Well, I
She
keep,
also meant, what do we keep out of the compost?
any virus problems you keep out of the compost, any virus problems. So if you have the mosaic on leaves where the leaf looks like a stained glass window, doesn't dye back, it just gets a strange color on it or distorted. Any virus infected material does not go in the compost because the compost is not going to kill viruses. Really, that's about it. Otherwise, if it's a hot compost, it kills weed seeds, it's going to kill the grass, the roots that you put in there. But in terms of diseases, that's what I watch out for.
There's a hand raised. Arena?
Yes, go ahead. You got to click your microphone on your
Yep.
toolbar.
Looks like.
There we go.
Go ahead, Arena.
Hi. So if we have Norway maples like everybody else does, and they do have this tar virus or whatever it's called when they
Tar spot.
black tar spot in the spring, and then can we still use those leaves as mulch? I've been struggling with this question back and forth because somebody told me no, and then somebody said yes. What do you think? I mean, when you use it, the tar is not there anymore because those leaves come in spring, and then the second set of leaves that comes afterwards don't have those black spots anymore, right?
Well, it can work that way. If it gets bad enough early to kill a leaf, then the next leaf that comes aren't infected. But tar spot is not, I say go ahead and use the leaves. A lot of extension bulletins, when tar spot showed up, was that 20 years ago now, Steve? Wow.
Yeah, it's been about 25 years.
About 20 years ago, we started seeing tar spot primarily on Norway maples from Oregon all the way over to Pennsylvania. I mean, all of a sudden there it was. It's a fungus disease that was a problem in nurseries sometimes, and nursery people would assiduously pick up the leaves that had tar spot on them because they had a nursery full of little seedling trees, and they don't want them to be losing the leaf surface. But when it explodes into the whole population of Norway maples and then worked its way into red maples and even some sugar maples now,
Silver have it too.
right, you can go ahead and clean up the leaves, which is what the extension says, take all the leaves away. What about the neighbor's maple? Well, because this is a spore that drifts around in the spring. What about the vacant lot at the end of the street that's full of Norway maples? That inoculant is all over the place, and it is toned way down. I think some natural controls have gotten into working on that. So I say go ahead and use the leaves. And if you look at the leaves in the spring, that's when they get infected. If you take
Right.
and you hold it up to the light, you can see faded circles in it. The spores that make it turn black are going to come later. And it has to be pretty badly infected to drop off and a clean leaf come out and at the time when they don't get infected. But I'd go ahead and use them. We've done it.
We have.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we have two piles. We have a pile where we just keep the leaves and let them disintegrate. We still mulch them, and then we use them as a mulch for the winter cover on all the beds, including vegetable beds.
Yeah. Jerry, our friend Jerry, was an incredible vegetable gardener. Not a stitch of lawn anywhere in the backyard. It was all vegetables and all cisterns and water redirected from roofs and whatever to water his gardens. That's all he did every year. Every year at the end of the year, he loaded leaves on top of the garden, let them break down, and then he tilled it in the springtime. And he had no disease problems, despite the fact that he was growing the same things over and over and over in a city backyard. So yeah, leaves are a good organic addition to the soil. And just too bad so many people throw them away.
So just use the clay in the spring and work it into the soil a little bit, right?
Yes, yeah. You don't absolutely have to. A Chinese couple that we met were explaining to us that we could just sheet compost between the rows and use the material that's breaking down as mulch. And it works to do that.
On top of leaves, right?
Yeah, yeah. leaves, stems, things that you're taking down other places. Okay, you want to tell me if there's any, Steve?
There's she also had a question about Chinese lanterns.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
she was wondering, she doesn't like the cucumber beetles, terrified of the roots, but come fall, nothing beats the color, and they are great dry. What is your opinion? Should I try to get rid of them?
I planted Chinese lantern like you. I think the seed pod, that orange lantern that develops, is outstanding, and nothing else is that color. But the plant runs like somebody's chasing it, and I just got tired of it. When it went underneath the sidewalk at a client's house and came up on the other side 3 feet away. I said, okay, that's it. If you can run that far. So I took it out. It's not nearly as bad as bindweed. So if you
No.
loosen the soil and chase the roots, you can pretty much, and then come back knowing that it might show up in the same area again, you're all right. We've still got some in this garden here. Some of it was had rooted itself, tangled itself in the roots of a shrub that I don't want to dig out. So I keep beating it back into that area, and I think it'll be gone this year. That is one pollen covered bee.
All right. Was that also Irina? Sorry.
Barbara's asking if we've heard of spruce for killing weeds. Because I don't shop for weed killers, I'm much more of being the weed killer myself. I don't see new products, so I haven't seen it.
Yep, I haven't noticed it. Sometimes I walk down that aisle in nurseries or something just to see what's
Yeah,
on the shelf.
I
But
used to do that. Citric acid would be another one of the burn downs, kind of like vinegar, but I don't know the product. The nice thing about buying a product already prepared for you is that someone has made a formulation that has something that helps it stick to the leaf, or something that makes it last even if it rains one time. Whereas the things that we make in our own kitchen, maybe we do a half and half vinegar and water to spray to burn down weeds. That's something that if it rains that night, you're going to have to put it back on again.
okay,
Okay,
nothing new.
okay. Smelling spring does lighten my step, but not really. Stay off the soil. For years, we've been telling you about running around with our snowshoes on, and we do. This is our friend Mary. She and I were cutting down burning bushes that had been attacked by the rabbits in the wintertime and had been badly damaged. So we cut them all the way down to the ground and let them regrow. But you can see that this ground is still icy and wet. And if we walk on that when it's like that, when you press the soil down, it's like pressing a sponge down and leaving a weight on top of it. There's no way that the sponge can pull air through what's under it and lift itself back up again. And you don't want to do that to your soil. So wait until the soil is drained well enough that you can walk on it, or get a pair of snowshoes. They work pretty well. We were talking to a friend that we didn't realize wasn't familiar with snowshoes and how they work. I stepped off of my snowshoes while Steve and I were up north one day. I wanted to get closer to the waterfall that we walked through the woods to see. And I'd just gotten used to being on the snow and in the woods. There are trees all around. And okay, I can't see the flare at the bottom of the tree, but that's because there's snow there. I wasn't thinking that I was walking on top of 6 feet of snow. Not until I decided to take my snowshoes off. I stepped off the snowshoes and sunk right up to my waist in snow. Steve and our friend Mark had to come and haul me over toward a tree so that I could grab a small tree and pull myself up and get back on the snowshoes. And that's because if you're walking on your feet, you're putting probably 20, 25 pounds per square inch of pressure on the soil. If you put your foot into a snowshoe and make your foot that much bigger, you're putting on maybe 5 pounds of pressure. So you are spread out. It's the same way that polar bears can walk on the snow with their great big wide feet. So you don't want to have this happen. This tree fell over because it finally got big enough that the weight on top overbalanced it where it could not grow any roots down. Now, trees have shallow roots, but look how shallow this is. This is water sitting underneath it because the ground is so hard packed underneath that lawn that even 20 years later, it's still hard packed and the water just sits there. So that tree has been slushing around for years. And you
And
don't,
that compaction is a huge issue in the landscape.
yeah,
So,
huge. And when you walk on grass, you can make that difference. So this is a sandy soil. Even sandy soil can get packed down to where, in this case, it was packed down by a machinery going across the top of it. It only takes 3 or 4 passes with an end loader or a skid steer or a bulldozer or a truck to make the soil compress like that. And then it's not going to fluff itself back up because it doesn't have the ability to pull air through it in order to release that and be that sponge effect. We hear from people this week at the Hardy Plant Society. I was talking about soils, and someone asked about how we fluff up the soil to make our new garden and add lots of things, and the soil stands up and it's nice and fluffy. And then you come back a few years later and it's down flat. Here's that garden later. Steve, I reversed
that previous picture is reversed.
reversed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is from a slide that we scanned, and I forgot I put it in the wrong way, but you can see how mounded up it is. And here, this was, a year and a half, 2 years later, where it's flattened itself out. They said, well, what do you do? We got it, made it nice and fluffy. The difference is that when we're double digging here, Barbara and I'm opening up a trench. Behind the trench, I've already opened this trench, the front half of this. Barbara is loosening the bottom and putting compost in. Now I'm opening a new trench that'll go right behind her. And then she'll come and loosen that one. And we're doing that in order to get compost mixed in further. And how the compost is going to mix in is through these macro spaces, these huge spaces between the clods of packed down soil. And what's going to happen in every bit of the surface of that clod there is that the microbes that live in the compost, the animals that live in the soil, and there are lots of them, all kinds of sizes, are eating organic matter and excreting what's called microbial glue. And little particles of clay will stick to that glue and stick them to sand grains and end up making crumbs with a lot of space in between. So this root cap, this is a teeny tiny root. We're looking at 100 times this normal size. These are not worms. These are nematodes that normally you wouldn't see with your naked eye. The root cap is a special set of tissues at the tip of a root that create and exude a slimy substance. And that slimy substance keeps the root from getting damaged as it pushes its way through the particles of soil. But see these little bits of sand, that's not a boulder and it's not a gravel, that's a bit of sand. There's clay stuck to it by microbial glue. And this slime, every animal in the soil wants to eat that slime. So the more roots grow, the more life there is in the soil around it, and the more smaller spaces there are. So you go from great big spaces that are too big to smaller spaces, and it does settle down, but the air is still there in all of these small spaces and able to move through. This is 1,000 times enlarged, and these are the root hairs. Behind the root cap, you'll get fuzz. That's what it looks like to us, fuzz, but each of those is a root hair that's absorbing water. You have spores of various kinds and fungal threads. What goes on in the soil is anybody's guess. You talk to a soil scientist or an organic chemist, and they will say, here's what happens when you mix these two chemicals together. But if you mix them together in the soil, all bets are off. We don't know what's going to happen because of all the action that's there. A teaspoon of soil can have 1 billion, that's with a B, organisms living in it. So what we want to do is let those things work, and they need air to work. So don't press your soil down. They need these crumbs. It's called flocculating. Crazy word that makes a sandy soil become crumbly so that there's lots of air in it, and it works the same way in a loamy soil, and it works that way in a clay soil too. Someone else asked about the soil. I think it was Donna said, well, what happens when your soil in your planter, your medium, whatever you used, potting mix, gets lower every year? I didn't think about that when we were first filling these planters up on top of a roof garden in Boston. And it wasn't until this year that I looked at it and said, oh, now, because I've waited several years, and there's mostly weeds growing in here, a bunch of yellow cress is growing, but there was a good 3-inch gap. I'm not going to put 3 inches of potting mix on top of the roots of this paper bark maple or on top of the juniper that's carved into the teddy bear there. I have to lift the plants at that point. But if I add the same potting mix every year on the top as a mulch, just like adding the compost every year on top of a garden as a mulch, then the soil and microbes live even in potting soil once it gets working and once those roots are in there, then those animals will pull that down in and keep the level right. So if you keep it alive, you're great. In New York City, we were on a 22-story penthouse garden, gorgeous garden, 900 square feet of garden up in the sky. And every year, we would carve V's out of the sides of the pots and add a mixture of compost and peat into the holes to get mixed around. And you couldn't tell where we dug it, where we cut the slices the year before. They just get incorporated into the larger mass.
It's after 8 o'clock.
Oh dear.
Arena has a hand raised,
Okay.
and Michelle also had a comment. Her neighbor ran cement trucks down the property line between our houses, right next to maple trees and 2 white pines. So sad. Probably compacted that soil quite a bit.
It's gonna need to be aerated there. And
Yep.
you're probably going to be using a soil aerator, a core aerator. I can show you that pictures of what that looks like next week, because it sounds like we're out of time. I'm really glad that everybody was here.
We'll let Arena go ahead and ask her question.
And
Just a
and
quick
Donna,
question.
okay, and 1 second, Arena. Donna, don't leave. Donna Hughes, you asked, and we got some answers for you. We'll tell the whole group about them next week. But I'd like to make sure that you get the answers we got from Barry for you. So hang on. Okay, Arena, sorry.
So can I add like soil mix with compost? We have in Farmington Hills, they bring this free, they call
Yeah.
it compost. I really don't know what it is. It's a rich black soil, and we make our own compost. So I was going to mix it. I still have some left from last fall. Can I add it on top of perennial beds? And
Yes.
how thick of a layer can I add?
You can use it if it's clean and fresh. It's been
Yeah.
hot composted. You can use it as your mulch. So you can use it as 1 to 2 inches. It's going to end up decomposing down just like a potting mix would. But I'm not sure Farmington Hills is part of the Southeast Oakland County recycling group, SACRA. But if it's SACRA, it's good compost. It's been made hot. It's clean of seeds. It's moist, so seeds that blow in are going to sit on it and grow more than they would in a drier mulch like wood chips or bark chips. But it makes a nice mulch, and we've used it an inch or two too deep between perennials without any problem.
Between perennials, not on top of perennials.
This time of year, it can go right on top of them. But
All right.
once they start coming up, we use it between them.
All right. So I can just take it as soon as it thaws. I can just take a layer and put over the whole bed, because I was replanting some plants and now the soil is not even, and it's not that it bothers me. I just want to give them more soil.
And it's good to even out the soil when you end up with craters from digging around in it. You end up with places where the air doesn't move as well. It's
Right, so that water doesn't stand there.
right. It's ironic, Irina, but it was in Farmington Hills that I first saw just what perennials can do when a landscaper brought 4 inches of muck soil, that's what he called it,
All right.
and loaded it on top of a client's garden. And I was digging to rescue the perennials. I was amazed at how many of them were making it up even through 4 inches, but I wouldn't put more than 1 or 2 inches on.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, that's it.
That's it. We'll sign off
Except for
officially.
what you're going to talk to Donna about.
Right, we'll sign off officially here with Steve's. Oh, King Edward Yarrow. Oh, I forgot I put that out there. I better go rescue that. Your penstemann's gonna kill it. I love King Edward Yarrow, the little bitty yarrow here. Okay, so we'll end up with oh God, don't you just love what plants can do with water?
Yes.
That's Frre4All Friday. And we'll be back next Friday, March 14th. Happy to talk to you, to as many people as want to come and talk. And Barry Burton is who I'm going to talk to Donna about. Barry Burton is going to do one of our webinars in the next season in July. Barry is the director of, the project director of landscape design services for the city of Detroit. And we've heard from him before. He's in charge of, in creatively, wonderfully creatively, innovative, energetic ways of dozens of parks and the gardens in the parks in the city of Detroit. And Donna Hughes, who was recently employed, recently hired by the city of Clawson to do gardens there, asked about what kind of planters the city should be using. Very strongly recommends, Donna, that you use earth. I have to move a picture out of the way here. Let's see. That pass the other ones, because water, Donna is right that watering is the big issue. This is at Chicago Botanic Garden, and they water them. You can tell they water them. They have to keep watering them all the time. We're going to zip past these other things because we'll let Barry talk about those another time. But he recommends Earth Planter, and you can go to earthplanter.com to see them. The reason that he likes these is that they have a very good reservoir in them, so that early in the year, up until, he says, up until about the third week of June, you do have to water the top because your plants have not yet extended their roots very far into the planting medium. So you do water from the top. But once the annuals get going, all you have to do is fill the reservoir maybe once a month. And that's a big issue at the city of Detroit, is to have enough people to take care of all of these park gardens that are being set up. He also recommends that you plant them very tight, pack the annuals in, because you want them to mulch their own potting mix right away. But he said these are wonderful, and you can find them at earthplanter.com. He said they're worth the price. So that's what you want to look at, and we'll talk more about containers at another time. Thank you very much, everyone who's been here and everyone who stayed. Talk to you next Friday.
Yep. Ta-ta for now, everybody.